$15 million budget at the time, which wasn't high, but like the thought of getting that for that type of material these days just wouldn't occur. And we had everything that we wanted. We had, just really the crew that we wanted, the cast that we wanted, the locations that we wanted, the number of shooting days that we wanted. Technology wasn't quite what we wanted yet, so day one of first day of going on location, there was an ice storm, but by the last 2 weeks of the film, it was springtime, and there's several shots in the movie where you see that in full bloom, and we got to fix maybe like 7 of them, but CGI mapping technology was just beginning to be used, so you couldn't just like go into an image, digitize it, and lay out the snow on it. It was really hard. Almost 6 figures, per shot. Where now that's under 4 figures. Like I do mapping technology on shots in my movies now for under $1,000. So it was like worlds apart. So, I can't watch that film without getting angry, because the Tobey Maguire, Kevin Kline driving sequences, it's in full spring outside the window, or the moment when Jamie Sheridan comes to tell, Kevin comes to tell Jamie Sheridan that the son has died. Out behind Kevin's head, it's springtime. It's just a close-up on his head. You barely see it through the door crack, but that's all I see. Is like there's no snow on the ground. Don't film in glass houses unless you want to,
So you talked about how that doesn't happen anymore. So maybe as a way, we don't need to recap the entire panel we had yesterday, but for the folks who might not have been there. So what happened if that was this moment of sort of purity in terms of what you were able to achieve in terms of having budget available to you and I guess opportunity because of that. What changed, and then what did you do about it?
I think that the promise of indie film, which was both, in some ways, best epitomized and destroyed by Pulp Fiction, it is what I still yearn for. In that, I really believe audiences want fresh, original, ambitious, unique cinema. And that's what Pulp Fiction created and demonstrated how much they want it when they have access to it. The Ted Sarandis, the chief creative officer, chief content officer at Netflix, used to say regularly how when somebody's a member of Netflix, their taste moves to auteur cinema. And the more friends that they had on the platform, the faster it moved to auteur cinema. Like, I don't think that Americans only want movies that have numbers after them. They want films that tell them different things about the lives that they're leading, and are entertaining, and smart, and emotional, and take them to different places. But it's very hard that what happened with Pulp Fiction is it showed corporate America that there was real profit to be made. And at the same time, the nature of that business, particularly for a publicly traded company, is you can't take on the real risk. And because it's all about how quickly they report their earnings and all of that, it leads to risk mitigation, which means trying to make movies for that are pre-branded before that are no longer execution dependent, that have their success mapped out for it. And so we're in a point of culture where it's really kind of thought of that the best way for someone to discover or find a film is to scream really loudly. That those who scream the loudest, make most box office. So you need films that can justify a tens of millions of dollars spent on marketing, and a film that comes from a literary piece of material or has difficult emotional stuff that is not for every audience but for a specific audience can't justify that. And until we go back and rebuild it so that we have ever increasing circles, a ripple effect in terms of that type of more challenging, ambitious, and playful cinema, we're not going to have access to it. We're at a really kind of a crossroads, I think, where that kind of corporate mentality or profit-driven planning, you know, along with a superabundance of content and a fragmented audience, puts ambitious, diverse culture seriously at risk. That if we're not, as a community and an audience, saying this is what the world that we want, and we are really going to support it and fight to make sure that it continues to flourish, we could lose. You know, and there's many different factors that play into that. But I think that really in 5 years' time, there may not be anything that we can say is American art cinema. Ever. Yeah, it's something.
I'm pausing on that statement, letting it sink in. So does that mean you're optimistic or pessimistic?
Well,
how do you really feel?
You know, on the flip of it, it's an incredibly fascinating time to be a creative person. The costs of production have vanished. The cost of marketing and making something available and accessible to an audience have vanished. That the educational possibilities have been, you know, transparency of the process has become available to us. So, you know, I think a lot of people mistake those factors, believing that it means that they should just go out and do it, you know, and that has its own kind of negative effect, superabundance, where if people have a bad experience time and time again, they're discouraged from indulging afterwards. And I also think that, you know, another factor, I mean, the price point of engagement is really way too high for, you know, ambitious cinema. But ultimately, you know, I think that it's those kind of, that dialectic between the great time for creation and the really difficult time for business. But for those that are either investors or those that have strategy on how they do something, it's a great time because, you know, much the way like when people ask, you know, how did you make 70 film? You know, I would say there are 3 factors to that. Right timing. I arrived when the industry was really slow to recognize that the art, the audience, and the technology had changed, and I was able to get not only my foot to the door, but build a whole house on the other side of the entryway. My 3 factors. Something along the way. I've just lost track of, you know, jumping into my metaphors. But at the same time, those that, you know, the reasons it's a great time for those, you know, I think that artists still, their desire isn't matched by their willingness to do the work to get their end goal. That people want their work to be seen, they're not willing to do the work that is required or possible that will help that. So filling in that gap is a great opportunity for business people and facilitators, and there's a lot that can be done there. And I think that the focus and kind of singularity, the dominant culture industries of Hollywood and broadcast television limit the type of content that is being created. And so for those that are willing to embrace doing something different, because really I think the key to success for you know, producing is, you know, how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace? And I think that that's really easy to do because I'm not generally, though I have made a movie about a man in a spandex suit, I'm generally not engaging in those films, at least ones where the people actually have superpowers. And you know, as much as I do love a good family film, I can't really make those movies because of the cost of marketing them. So I continue to pursue content that's very different, I think, from what is generally getting made.
So let's define this idea, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. Let's define this. You talked a minute ago about this idea of ambitious cinema, and essentially your fear that it would be gone from a culture, from this culture. Let's break down what ambitious cinema means to you, and then let's talk for just a moment about what might be done to help preserve it.
Well, there are a lot of factors that go into ambitious cinema, and I think that whether you're a filmmaker or an audience member, I've found it a really interesting and fruitful pursuit to try to define what are the qualities that I respond to in film. And I wrote, there's a blog post you can find if you Google Ted Hope, 32 Qualities of Better Film, where I wrote it, which was to me kind of an interesting thing. Like in some ways, those qualities, are for me the difference between a mediocre work and a great work. Trying to define, are there things that you can do that lift something up to a higher level? And, not that I'm like those people, but to me it's not just a coincidence that like when, Bach tried to find out the difference between mediocrity and greatness, he came up with 32 variations, and Beethoven came up with 33 variations. I didn't realize that until I made my list and someone pointed it out to me, and it's like, yeah, there are these things that you can do consciously to try to elevate a work. For me, the things that really do leap to the top of that list is to strive for originality, how to tell something in a fresh way or a fresh subject, something that we haven't seen before. Now, originality passes with time, and great work I do think is eternal. But in terms of engagement, what I engage with, I look for that. And ambition to me is actually really trying to do more than just deliver a proof, but actually to learn in the process, to try to create something new, engineer serendipity, that miraculous save before the plate, falls on the floor and crashes. How do you make sure that you have that quickness and foresight to grab it? The engineering of feeling like something's about to fall apart, but actually, grows in the process. So that requires risk. Culture, to quote Norman Mailer, and hopefully no one dies, from saying this, but culture requires some risks, and trying to have that as part of it. There's many other things that I think define ambitious cinema, but that's. Those two really kind of sit. And I would say authenticity, and I think that's very much something of the moment when I kind of think through the difference between what I would like to see as a new model versus an old model. How do you deliver something that doesn't just feel authentic, but actually has an authenticity